What up, Dr. Parks? How you doing?
I am great. Thanks for inviting me to your show.
Now, I have some dope people that come on with some dope topics, and they are subject matter experts. But just about everybody has one little tiny issue, and you got one too.
What?
You're a Patriots fan.
Oh gosh, you know what? I am, and I'm a proud Patriots fan, and I'm just really happy that you acknowledge that and you really know that and understand that. I feel honored.
Oh, sad. As smart as you are, as good as you are, like it's so sad. Like
You know,
you
it's
must.
a good
I
thing.
thought you were like a Brady fan, but you must be a Patriots fan for
No,
real.
I'm a fan of the team. It doesn't matter who wears the uniform. I am a fan
Right.
as long as they're in the uniform.
All right.
I don't know who Brady is.
You don't know what?
I don't know who Brady is.
Ooh, we'll talk about that a little bit later. We'll talk about and that little mess of a cap you gave me for my birthday is still
It's so pretty.
still stuck in the back of a drawer somewhere. By the way. So thank you for coming on tonight. I appreciate it, man. As you know, we have this cool little group. It's called What's Better Than One Black Millionaire, and our hashtag is Give Away the Game. And so we want to do some of that tonight as well because we're trying to cover as many topics as possible. And and we touched on it briefly how it don't matter how much money you have, or how much how successful your career is. If you're not healthy, man, it puts a damper on all of that. So we're going to get into why it's important to to be healthy, and how actually being healthy contributes to your ability to gain wealth and to grow your business and to improve your career. And so I think I have one of the best people to have that conversation with. And so thank you again for hanging out with us this evening, in spite of the team you support. I can get through this. I really can. I really can. I gotta shake that part out of my head. So first and foremost, just tell the people who you are. Tell us about your organization really quickly, and what you do.
All right, so my name is Dr. Parks, and I'm a naturopathic physician. And for those of you who are not really familiar with what that is, it means that I am a primary care doctor, but my focus is in natural medicine. So I don't do any drugs or surgery. Everything in my whole practice is completely natural. And my goal is always to restore health. And then my practice is really big on prevention. So I always think the best disease to get is one you never get. So it's really a big focus on prevention. And that's what I do. It's pretty much lifestyle medicine.
Gotcha. That's dope. That's dope. So how long have you been practicing?
Too long. And this is my 12th year in practice.
Oh, nice, very good. So you're over the hump when it
Yeah.
comes to business. I'm always fascinated talking to physicians who own their own practice, because you're in an interesting position. You're in one of those roles where people just kind of look to you as, first of all, you have instant credibility because you're a physician. Then second of all, it's almost like, you have a business, but you're in the business of helping people.
Right.
And so sometimes being in that business, people kind of look at you like, why can't you just help me if I can't pay for it, or if I don't want to pay for it, or because you have the ability to help me. So I'm always interested. So we'll get into that whole side of being an entrepreneur as well. Why did you go the natural path versus a traditional medical doctor?
So that's a pretty long story, but I'll just try to give you the short version of it. So, funny story. I had no idea what I wanted to be when I grew up, when I was a little kid. And I grew up in Jamaica, and one of the things that people always ask you, when your parents take you somewhere, it's like, oh, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I had no idea. And then I went to high school pretty young. I was 10 when I went to high school, and we had orientation, and all the parents were in the classroom, and everyone, all the kids had to stand up and introduce themselves and like say what they wanted to be when they grew up. And people were getting up and saying all sorts of things. And my last name starts with P, and they were going alphabetically. So the girl who went right before me, she said she wanted to be a doctor, and like all the parents like cheered and clapped. And I'm like, well, that must be the right answer. So I want to be a doctor when it was my turn. And every time somebody asked me that since I was 10 years old, that was the answer I gave them. And I continued saying that until, you know, it was time for me to choose what subjects I was going to study in college. And they were like, well, what do you want to be? And I'm like, I want to be a doctor. So I just went on that path with absolutely no real intention or plan behind it. It was just my answer. And here I am. So
No,
that's how I ended up here. And I chose naturopathic medicine because even though I kept saying I wanted to be a doctor, I had no desire to really be a doctor because I do not like sickness or disease or death or anything related to people being really sick. Like I couldn't imagine myself working in a hospital or being around people who are critically ill or dying every day. It's just not my personality. And so when I was in college and it was really time to like go to medical school, I couldn't do it. Like I couldn't imagine myself working in a hospital or in that kind of setting. And then I discovered that there were actually doctors whose focus was wellness, like all their patients are healthy. And those were naturopathic doctors. And I did some research. I found out more about the program and I applied to naturopathic school, and I never looked back.
Wow, that's pretty dope. So for the most part, first of all, we can't just skate past the fact that you went to high school when you were 10. Most 10-year-olds are going to the fifth grade. Going to the fifth grade, and you're in high school.
Yeah.
How was that being 10 and hanging around with, you know, teenagers?
It was interesting. It was interesting. I was done at 15, so by 15 I was done with high school. I was always older in spirit, I think. So I always have friends and stuff who are older than me. And so I felt like
Say that again, Dot. You broke up a little bit.
oh, I said I've always felt like I'm older in spirit, and I've always been surrounded by people older than me. So I just felt like I fit right in.
Just fit right in. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other cool thing, and you know, I talk to people all the time about just kind of manifesting or designing your life. And for the most part, from age 10 until you went to college, you kept saying, I'm gonna be a doctor, I'm gonna be a doctor, I'm gonna be a doctor. So you couldn't have been anything else if you said that for 5 years. There was no way you were gonna do anything else but become a doctor.
Right.
Yeah. So and then you chose the path of, you know, becoming a natural path physician. So before I knew what a naturopath physician really was,
Mm-hmm.
I often wondered, you know, do you treat the same things that medical doctors treat in terms of illness and disease? So do you treat hypertension and diabetes, you know, the chronic, particularly in our community, those chronic illnesses?
So the short answer to that is yes, absolutely. The real answer is no. I treat people. I do not treat symptoms or diseases or illnesses whatsoever. I treat people, and people happen to have a lot of these conditions. So one of the things with naturopathic medicine that makes it completely different from our standard medical care is that we really don't do symptoms. And that's one of the issues in this country is that medical care, as you already know, is governed by the insurance industry. They're like married together, you know? And so one of the reasons I moved to North Carolina to start my practice was that there was no insurance coverage for naturopathic medicine in North Carolina. In Connecticut, where I used to live, insurance does cover naturopathic medicine, and it just doesn't work because insurance is a symptom and diagnosis-based model. And how we're trained as naturopathic doctor is we look at the person, we look at the whole picture. We look at their lifestyle, we look at their family history, we look at, you know, their everything that goes into making them them, because all the things that surround you, that's what goes into making you healthy or sick. So we look at the whole thing and we treat the whole picture. We don't treat specific diseases. Now, with the insurance model, that's what it is. Everything is a code, everything is a disease, and everything is really specific and specified. And a lot of times that's why we end up with what we end up with, because people are not really getting treated. Their numbers are getting treated, and that does not work because people are super complicated.
Gotcha. That's pretty dope. So you treat people instead of, that's an interesting concept, instead of the illness, and it's really kind of foreign, because for years that's what, you get sick, quote unquote, you go to a doctor. If you get, you get high blood pressure, you go to a doctor. If you got headaches, you go to a doctor. So it's all driven by those symptoms that you get, is when you go see the doctor. So when you talk about treating, when you say everything, are you talking about like their environment, their upbringing? Do you take all that into account?
Absolutely. I can't tell you how many times I've been working with someone and I kind of hit a dead end, like we're not getting the results that I think we should be getting at that point. And it's not until I really dig deeper that we uncover something either in their everyday life and in their just their lifestyle that is causing the problem. Or a lot of times it's deeper things. It's things from their past. It's things in their family history. Like, I gave an example the other day of a lady who came to me. She's in her 60s, and she was having really, really hard time sleeping. She just wouldn't sleep. She'd wake up at 3:23. I will never forget this when she told me. She woke up at 3:23 a.m. every morning, just wide awake, and that's the middle of the night for most people. And she'd been doing that for about 30 years. Now, she went to a lot of different doctors. She's been on sleeping pills and all sorts of different medicines. And 30 years later, she was still waking up at 3:23. And when she told me that, I was like, okay, there's something going on here. The time you do wake up at night does matter, by the way, if anybody's listening who's waking up at night. But what really, and she didn't know why she was waking up at that time. And it's one of the most interesting stories for me, because it really helped me to realize how important your life experience is. After several sessions and her trying to like figure it out and me trying to figure it out, she came in one day and said, you know what, I remember. She was living in a different city at that time. Obviously, she was 30 years younger, and she said it was a rough time. She lived in like an inner city neighborhood, and there was a lot of violence and gangs and whatnot going on. And she had a dream that somebody broke into her house and like shot her. Like, it was a dream. It did not happen, but in her mind, it happened. And she woke up out of that dream, and she said she was panting. She was just in a sweat. And when she looked over at the clock, it was 3:23. 30 years later, she was waking up at 3:23, and nobody had any idea why. Sleeping pills weren't working. None of the stuff that she'd been given by her doctors were working. And that is because nobody ever really stopped to ask why. Like, it's like, oh, you wake up every night, you're not sleeping, take these pills. But nobody ever stopped to ask why. And it wasn't until we figured out why that we were able to actually fix the problem. And so that's the difference between naturopathic medicine. It's really between naturopathic medicine and regular medicine. Like, I really treat people. I go underneath the diagnosis. Her diagnosis was just unexplained insomnia, but a diagnosis does nothing for me. Now, having the history of where this came from and how it started, getting underneath and finding the cause, that's how I was able to help her get over this issue. Now she sleeps like a baby.
Wow. So in that specific situation, how did you treat? Because it's not, like you said, it's not like something that's has to do with biology.
Right. And it was yeah. It was psychological. It wasn't real. It's not like she had PTSD because she had this traumatic thing. Somebody on Facebook just commented that it was real versus perceived danger. The thing is, the thing that runs each one of us, we have this complicated hormonal system in our body. And the cortisol hormone is our fight or flight or stress hormone. That is the one that we've all been bathing in for the entire 2020. It is a very dangerous hormone because it has memory. It has a cycle and it remembers things. So even though the thing didn't really happen, her body remembered that at that specific time, and it's very unconscious. It's not like she was remembering this or thinking about this. Cortisol rhythms are unconscious and we can't always control them. So her body kind of created that memory and kept going through that cycle without her even realizing. I see this a lot in high blood pressure too. I've had, there's one example of a patient where, you know, she hated her job. So many people hate their job, but she has had really long-term high blood pressure, and her blood pressure is always super, super crazy high on Monday mornings. Why? Because she's got to go back to work on Monday. Thursday evenings, Friday evenings, on the weekends, her blood pressure is great. On Monday, her blood pressure is almost stroke high.
Wow.
Only because of the perception that she's going to have to go to work. She was a little older too, so I actually asked her gently, instructed her to get retired early. She could retire early, so she retired a couple of years early because she wouldn't have made it with her blood pressure doing that. And when she came to me, she was on 4 different blood pressure medicines, and that it did not matter. It was the perception of the fact that she's going to have to go to work on Monday. 2 years after she retired, her blood pressure was still high on Mondays, because her body had that cortisol memory. And it's, you know, being conscious of how your body works is really important when it comes to getting better for real, not just, okay, let me just take these blood pressure pills. Because anybody on blood pressure medicine knows that blood pressure medicine only works for a short amount of time, then it stops working. And then you have to add another one or increase the dose. And then add another one or increase the dose, because nobody ever asks why. You have to fix the real reason. And when it's cortisol and stress hormones, you have to address that. And so that's how I was able to help that lady, is help bring down the cortisol and stress hormones, and then bring her awareness to that was happening, because she just wasn't even aware that it was connected to something else that had happened previously.
Gotcha. So you said earlier that you don't use medicine, right? So say again.
No prescription drugs.
Okay, so you don't prescribe drugs.
No.
Of any kind. So in that case, or in a similar case, you know, we've been taught that if I have high blood pressure, I take this drug that's going to help reduce my blood pressure. Or if I have diabetes or whatever I have, I take this drug and it's going to help improve that. If I have migraines, I take this. We see the commercials all the time. So how do you successfully help people treat the entire body, but you don't use drugs?
Okay, so first we have to ask, well, why are you even seeing commercials for drugs? Like, why is that a thing? Why is, like, what is this model where you have an illness and then you have a drug for it? Where did that come from? 100 years ago, that never existed. So 100 years ago in America, there were naturopathic doctors, there were chiropractors, there were eclectic doctors. There were so many different types of medical practitioners that you could go to that did natural things. The drug thing was never a thing. The pharmaceutical industry did not exist. After the Spanish flu, the I don't know who they were, but like the people who had a lot of money, was Carnegie and Rockefeller and those types of people. They actually saw a really good opportunity, because the Spanish flu was very similar to this pandemic that we're in, where people were, you know, locked up, and people finally realized, oh my God, without my health, if I get sick, that's it. Like, without my health, nothing else matters. So they actually used that opportunity because they saw, you know, the opportunity for a huge economic growth, because people were so concerned about their health, and they standardized all the medical schools in America. And so they sponsored all of them, like the ones that they thought would line up with this new model, and they put new labs in them. And then this is when they came up with the term "a pill for an ill." So every time you have an illness, there is a pill that matches up with that illness. And so all the doctors in this new medical model went to medical schools that were sponsored and still sponsored to this day by the industry that's creating all the pills. And so the medical education in America 100 years ago turned into doctors who are learning how to manage disease, not cure them, just manage disease with these pills. And it's in business, that this is a great business model because it's income that is coming in over and over every time somebody fulfills a prescription. That is income that, like, there is no stopping that. It's like a nonstop money train. And so that's the medical model that we inherited, and that's the traditional medical model that's going on right now. Now, what I practice is what used to happen way before all of this, and this is what happens in lots of cultures around the world that are not, like pharmaceutical industry isn't the money-making industry in those places. So I practice like regular medicine that most of the world practices. Just in America, that's not a thing. Like the regular medical schools are now, so like everybody does the same thing. Everybody learns the same thing. There's a thing called standard of care where, like, literally that's not a real thing, and there should never be a standard of care because everybody's different. So you say, like, I have people headaches, whatnot. If 10 people come into my practice, like I run an online clinic, and if we get 10 people and all of them have migraines, all of them have headaches, I guarantee you all 10 of them walk out with a completely different plan of action, because I always ask why. Your headache is a headache. A headache is just a symptom. There's not a pill that can treat a headache. You can get a pain pill that can, dull the pain and make it go away, but it doesn't fix the reason you had a headache. So this is why people have chronic headaches, because the headaches will come back once the pill wears off and the problem doesn't get fixed. So I do something that's very individualized, and I look at why. So if I can figure out why, like maybe you're too stressed out, or maybe your prescription glasses need to be changed because you're straining your eyes, or maybe you're dehydrated, or maybe your blood pressure is too high, that's why you keep getting headaches, or maybe you have a hormonal imbalance that's giving you headaches. There's a different reason why you would get a headache versus why I would get a headache. So my treatment is very individualized. Now, if I was a regular doctor, I would just write a prescription for a pain pill for everybody who came in with a headache. Same prescription. Same, it's an ill and you get a pill. And that's why people keep refilling their prescriptions, because they never actually get better.
Gotcha. Wow. So you touched on a couple of things. You talked about the pandemic that we're going through. And on the heels of that, you talked about stress. So, and I know, and I believe you said maintenance is really, really important to you. What are some of the things that entrepreneurs can do for maintenance, and even non-entrepreneurs? Because you got people who they work full-time jobs, and now they're teachers all of a sudden. They're homeschooling the kids all of a sudden, and they still have to do all of the regular things, grocery shop, yard work, and then they got this pandemic thing. We got to wear masks, so it's just a whole lot of different triggers that help create additional stress. And then if you do own a business, it's been tough for many, many businesses just because of the lockdowns and the shutdowns and people not being able to move the way they move, people moving differently. So when it comes to a time like this, right, because I just believe the pandemic is it's kind of like what you're saying. A pandemic is just, there are different types of pandemics. We're experiencing a pandemic on this level as a result of COVID-19. However, there are other situations and circumstances that can create similar environments, right? So I just believe that whatever we do to get through this one, we need to kind of hold on and remember those things and kind of tie those things to the other types of potential pandemics or situations that may look and feel like what this one looks and feels like. So when it comes to maintenance, right, what are some of the things you would tell people right now to be doing to reduce their stress level?
Okay, one of the first things I would say is you need to focus inwardly, because everything out there is a hot mess. Like, it's not, there is no joy or no peace if you focus outwardly. So a lot of times the stress and the anxiety comes from looking at everything that's going on around us. And it's not good. Like, you have to be blind in 2020 to realize that the world is in a really concerning state. And so if you keep focusing on that, then you're going to create more stress. Now, your brain is going to do whatever you tell it to do. Like, that is the beauty of a brain. It will do whatever you tell it to do. So if you're focusing on everything that's going on out there, your brain is getting messages like, oh my God, what's going to happen, blah, like, with so much going on, and you're constantly creating internal turmoil and anxiety. Your stress levels during this time are probably going to be way higher because there's more on your plate, but then there's more going on. And if you keep focusing on it, the stress levels get higher and higher. That cortisol level definitely will increase blood pressure. Cortisol blocks fat burning. So so many people have gained weight during this pandemic, and yes, they've been locked in their houses eating all sorts of stuff and not exercising, but you cannot gain weight without a hormonal role. So weight loss and weight gain are all hormonal, because we all know people who just eat whatever. They eat pizzas and burgers and fries and drink sodas, and they don't gain a pound. So we know those people. So it's not necessarily, oh my God, you're eating all this food. You probably shouldn't be eating all that junk food. But a lot of it is a hormonal a trigger. So when you get the cortisol high, and you have the kids at home, and now you're trying to figure out how to do third grade math, and you're 45. Like, it's a lot of things going on. So what I always like to say, you need to find time, make some time. I know time is hard to find, but you do have to find time to focus inward and focus on you and become quiet. You have to turn off the noise, leave the internet, leave the phone, leave the TV, turn off the TV.
Man, that is so true. I could not watch CNN no more.
No, turn it off. Like, I don't, when I first moved to Charlotte, I thought it was the worst place on earth, like the worst place, because I was new here. I didn't know anybody. And every night I'd come home from work and just watch the news. And I'm like, oh my God, somebody else got shot. This is ridiculous. I am packing up. I'm leaving this place. There's no way. Somebody stole a car somewhere. And I remember going to somewhere where the mayor of Charlotte, I forgot his name, but we had a black mayor at one point, this guy. And I went up to him and I was mad. I'm like, what are you going to do about all the crime in Charlotte? And he's like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, there's so much crime here.
Right.
Stop watching the news. And I was like, okay. I think Charlotte is the most peaceful, wonderful, amazing place on earth. Just because since that day, I turned off I don't even have cable anymore. I haven't had cable for like 10 years, but like, I turned it off, and I just think I live in utopia. Like, I really do not absorb all of that because I am very sensitive to stress. So I just turn it off. I have no idea what's going on in America at the moment, ever, really. Like, if something's happening, my friends know. If there's a hurricane or something crazy, they know they need to call me or text me, because I do not know what's going on. It's always bad.
That's such a great point, because you actually, like, when you don't consume, that, and that's one of, I think, the dangers of the internet, dangers of social media. I mean, if you're consuming that negative energy, like you said, your brain is going to believe whatever you tell it, right? It doesn't know if it's going to serve you or not. It just, whatever you put in there, it's going to use that. And so, yeah, that's a great point, because I actually feel better when I don't watch, CNN, and I don't watch stuff about what's going on with our, the election and all that good stuff. So yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah, at this point, most people in America think that they're about to die for one reason or the other. Like, there's so much fear. Everybody's scared, and it is a melting pot for disease. Because when your body is full of cortisol like that, cancer grows, blood pressure gets higher. You cannot control your blood sugars. And, so it's not like, I talk about stress a lot, but it's not just the stress. It's the things that grow out of the stress that we have to be concerned about.
Gotcha. So do you work with medical doctors, or do medical doctors work with you, or as a naturopath physician?
Well, it just depends. I do have a lot of patients who are medical doctors.
Okay.
But yeah, I don't know. My practice is completely independent, and unfortunately, the way we live and we use medicine in the society, the two of us, we don't really mix. So I do have a lot of doctors who come to me just for their own personal health because they're not trying to take these drugs. Um, but I don't collaborate actively. So a lot of doctors will refer. I have some doctors who refer their patients to me, but I do not have a collaborative relationship just because insurance doesn't cover what I do. So it's always outside of the regular medical situation.
Gotcha. So let's jump to the business side because you're a business owner as well. So all this wonderful information that you've just given us about, helping us to reduce our stress levels and the things that help reduce or eliminate disease, that's great. But you got to run a business too.
Right, right.
So what's been the most challenging aspect of being a physician, but then also running your practice as well?
Where do I start?
Wherever you want to.
Where do I start? So yeah, business is, I always tell people I have like 3, 4 different jobs. It looks like I only have one job, but I really wear so many different hats. It's not even funny. So business has been like the easiest part of my job is seeing patients. Like I always say, I can close my eyes and see patients. It's my joy. It's what I love to do, and I honestly don't know how to do anything else. So it's just what I do. So that part, about 30% of my time in business is actually spent taking care of patients. The other 70% of my time is spent running the business, and that is there's so many different challenges that come up, everything from technology to staffing to marketing. Like balancing it all has been a challenge for me, and it's still a challenge. And it really hasn't been until I have just kind of relaxed and accepted that things are going to change. The one thing that has been constant in my business is change. It's constantly evolving, constantly changing. And it wasn't until I realized that and I decided to let go of it and just let it change and let it evolve that some of that stress really finally left me.
Gotcha. So, me and my business partners and just a lot of folks that I've worked with, we spent a lot of time in the mental health space. And so we've seen clinicians, therapists and psychologists, psychiatrists. They do a really good job practicing, their craft. But many of them find themselves one day owning a business. And so, a trained therapist, or a psychiatrist, went to school anywhere from 5 to 10 years, but not one time had a marketing class. Like the things that you just talked about. They didn't have a marketing class. They didn't have a class on, on how to read a P&L, class on how to read a balance sheet. So how have you pivoted or morphed into a business owner, right? Because it has to be challenging because you weren't really trained, and
Right.
and it's kind of like, okay, like swim. I'm gonna throw you in the pool now. Swim. So how do you? What are some of the tips that you can give other people in a similar situation, or maybe even a vocation that they've never been trained to run a business, but one day they look up and they're like, oh, I got a business. I got to pay these. I got employees. So I got other people counting on me. I have to pay for this product, or I have to this inventory, or I got to pay this light bill, and I got to pay these taxes. So give some people some of the tips, some of the things that helped you kind of make that turn.
Well, one of the first things I would say is, regardless of what field you're in, if you are running a business, you are doing something that most people wouldn't even try to do. So you really should be proud of yourself for that. If you are in business, the challenge with any business is always financial. Like at the end of the day, it's always how do we make money, and how do we keep making money, and how do we make the business profitable. My advice would be to make sure you do not take on additional expenses, even if you think you can afford them. because this pandemic is a huge reminder that things can change overnight like that. So minimizing your expenses. If somebody had told me that 10 years ago, I'd be in a much different space right now. But minimizing your expenses is definitely the number one strategy for any successful business, just because it doesn't matter how much money you make if you're spending all of it. And so a lot of people get in business stress with, how am I going to pay these bills? How am I going to pay my employees? Because they're spending too much money. So if your business can't afford it, it cannot afford it. So don't do it. Your business, you have to take the steps that your business is ready to take. And again, all of this stuff that I'm saying is because I've made those mistakes myself and I've had to learn from them. Sometimes, we get this idea as entrepreneurs that we're going to just open the doors and it's just going to be amazing, and then we're just going to be millionaires and it's going to be great. And so we think big, and that it takes somebody who thinks big to become an entrepreneur in the first place. But because we think big, sometimes we skip over the details, the small steps that it's going to take for us to get to that end result. And we just feel like, okay, this is going on. All right, I'm going to jump on that. I'm going to do that. I'm going to pay for this. I'm going to scale my business before your business is ready. So my tip is to just start really, really small and spend no money. Do not hire extra people. Do not get all the bells and whistles. Don't do any of that until your business is ready to afford it. And even when it's ready to afford it, keep the budget small. Like it does not matter how much money you make or bring in at the end of the day if it all goes out in bills. Like you're still you could make $1 million, next month, but if your overhead is $1,000,050, now you're in the red. You cannot do that. So that would be my tip, and that reduces so much stress.
Gotcha. Yeah, you can preach that. It's not how much you make, it's how much you keep.
Yes.
How much you hold on to. Wow. So you're in Charlotte, right?
Yep.
So in your area, is there a lot of competition for what you do?
Well, I'm online. Like I don't have a physical location anymore.
Okay.
So I'm virtual. I don't ever think I have any competition. That's just my mentality. Like there are naturopathic doctors in Charlotte. There are not a lot of us, period, in the world. Definitely not a lot of us in the US. So competition is not a real thing. Like there are other doctors who do similar things, but none of them are me. So I never really think about competition in that sense at all.
So you're 100% virtual.
100%. So all our visits are like this. So they're videos. So we have camera visits, and people who don't want to get on camera, we have phone visits. So everything that we do is virtual.
Say that last part again. You broke up.
Everything we do is completely virtual. So video or phone.
Okay. So how was that shift? Because I think a lot of people, and I'll just me and with my company, we actually talked. Our CFO brought up, Ty, he brought up going virtual, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, and we pretty much talked ourselves out of it, right? Because we actually talked about, hey, we probably can do this, and we came up with some stupid reasons why we can't do it or couldn't do it. But if we can get out of a lease, we're getting out of that lease, and we'll go virtual because we've done really, really well, during the quote unquote pandemic. And so, how has that been for you going from? Because I've been in your office. You had a really nice office in a really nice part of town, and now you're 100% virtual. How has that been for you?
It's been awesome. I can't even say this sounds awful, but I love this pandemic. It's worked out for me. just because speaking of getting out of the lease, it allowed me to get out of that lease, that very expensive lease that I was in. But I always offered virtual services. So at one point, I was a very physical person. I had 3 offices. One was in Charlotte, one was in Raleigh, and one was in New Bern, North Carolina. And I was running around raggedy. Like I was from one to the next. So I was going all over the place. So in the last few years, I had downsized and consolidated to just having the Charlotte location. But I still had patients from Raleigh and New Bern and all those places that I still did virtual services with. And even in my Charlotte office, I have patients in New York and Massachusetts and Florida and all over the place. So I always offered virtual services. It was just not 100% virtual. But even the patients who lived locally, like a lot of them work and travel for work and they're always on vacation or doing whatever. So they would still call in for their appointments or to video for their appointments. So at one point it got to where I was doing about 70% virtual visits while I was still in the office space. And it was annoying because I'm like, I get showered and dressed and come here and I literally spend all day on the phone or on video. Like nobody wants to come in to see me. And so I had started the process of going virtual, but because there was just a lot of like, I never not had an office. So I'm like, I don't know how I'm going to do this. And it wasn't until I bit the bullet and I decided that 2020 was the year when I was going to go fully virtual. And that's how the pandemic helped me out, because right when, I was trying to make that transition, that's when everything shut down and it just kind of timed up perfectly.
Gotcha. So so once the pandemic is over, you don't expect to go back into another lease?
No, I'll never do that again.
No.
It's not required. So what I do is more consulting. So I don't do any physical services. Like I don't touch anybody. We don't do any of that.
Right.
If you need something that you need to be looked at or physically examined, I will refer you to your primary care doctor. They get paid to do that. I don't do that. But a lot of what I do is consulting. So I don't actually ever need to be in the same room with anybody. So the way my practice is going, and I'm changing a lot of the services now that we're in this all virtual model, that it's going to be even more accessible because now we're virtual. We can treat anybody anywhere.
Gotcha. Good stuff, man. I'm just fascinated by how so many businesses have just shifted to go virtual, and they're killing the game.
Yeah,
flat out killing the game. That's good stuff. We're gonna take some questions real quick. And
yeah, I love questions.
Cool. Let's put this one up right here. And it says, how do you address thyroid problems, specifically Graves' disease?
All right, Graves is funny because it's not the most common one. The most common thyroid problem is Hashimoto's, but Graves and Hashimoto's are kind of the opposite sides of the same coin. So for those of you who are not familiar with Graves' disease, this is hyperactive thyroid, where you're making a lot of thyroid hormone that you don't need. And the symptoms are a lot. They include rapid, crazy weight loss, high increased pulse, increased blood pressure, increased anxiety, issues sleeping. It's really not fun. So the traditional treatment for this is either surgery or radiation of the thyroid, where they just remove it because they just can't figure out what's wrong with it, so they remove it. Now, I treat it a little bit differently, where we use specific herbs, and it depends. There's not like one treatment that works all the time. It depends on the stage of Graves, how high the hormone levels are. So I'd have to actually look at the levels and see how the person is doing symptomatically. And then I always ask why. It's like, why does that person have Graves' disease? What triggered it? And usually I have to go in and figure out the trigger. And once we remove that trigger and we use a lot of herbs to kind of get the body back into balance, we can usually save the thyroid. Now, Graves is pretty extreme. And if the case is very progressed, like if it's too far gone, then I generally, sometimes will recommend that you do get it removed. But a lot of times, if we can figure out the trigger for it, then we can definitely, reverse it and push it back to where it's more normal.
Gotcha. That's good stuff. Someone asked, where do you get referrals from? How do people find out about you? Do doctors, hospitals, and
I have a couple of doctors locally who refer to me, and I actually had one doctor that I worked with for years here. She's my favorite person, but she moved. But she still refers to me because now I'm virtual. So she has a practice in another state now, and she still refers to me. And I do 100%, I would say not 100, but like 98% of all the business that I've ever had for 12 years came from referrals. And they're just referrals from the people that I treat. Never, like I've tried to get into advertising, and here in the last couple of years since I've been thinking about going virtual, I've tried to do the online thing and do a little bit more of that, but most of my business comes directly from patient referrals. I see people and they just bring their people, and for over a decade, like my schedule is packed.
Gotcha. So you don't have problems getting new patients.
No, because I feel like if people feel good and they get better, like that's all the referrals you need. You don't need to advertise or market.
And I just love the fact that you start with, like, why does this person feel this way, or why do they have this symptom, right?
Yeah.
Because even as parents, we have our go-tos, right? And I can't remember, like, if my daughter says, I got a headache, Dad. I don't stop to go, I wonder, well, why does she have the headache? I go, okay, go get some Advil, right?
Right.
It's not even I don't stop to do that. And I think that's awesome. And I need to me personally just kind of focus on, trying to find out, well, why do we have these symptoms?
Right, right. Because that's the only way you fix it for real. Like you can keep medicating it and putting a band-aid over it, but it's never gonna go away permanently.
Right, right. Gotcha. Someone put in the comments they're interested in your feedback on COVID.
COVID.
How
Okay.
would you treat a patient with COVID?
If you are on Facebook, you can go to my Facebook page, Dr. Parks, and there should be a pretty in-depth long video that I did on Tuesday. So I did a Facebook Live where I did questions and answers about COVID, because it's now flu season and we've never had COVID mixed with flu season. And there is a lot of interesting little things going on with this situation that we have going. So COVID is just a viral infection. It's a very fancy virus, so it's not a regular virus. That's a whole discussion, but it's just a viral infection. So I treat a patient with COVID the way I do with any patient with a respiratory virus. Like it's no different in how you deal with it, because you deal with it by helping the immune system take care of it. The only thing that can take care of a viral infection is your immune system. There are antiviral drugs and all of that stuff, but if your immune system is not working, then none of the drugs work, because they all use your immune system to help. So if you go back to my page and watch that video, there's like tons of good information there. The key takeaways from the other night was the number one thing that they found, like there are all these studies coming out of Europe now that COVID's been around for a long time and they've had enough patients with it. And I've had a few patient experience with it, and all I do is just boost the immune system. There's nothing else to do. And they recover beautifully, because that's how our immune systems are supposed to work. Now, you are going to go, the takeaways were, make sure you do vitamin D, and you have to do vitamin D with K2. Vitamin D, that is the real pandemic. Everybody has low vitamin D because none of us spend enough time in the sun. And when we're in the sun, we're like this, we're wearing clothes, we're fully covered. Nobody's walking around with their chest and back out. And that's the real pandemic. The studies that are coming out of Europe are showing that the people who get sick and die, because you should not get sick and die from a little respiratory infection, which is really what COVID is. It's a little cold. Like that's what it is. The people who do really terribly with this are the people with low vitamin D levels. You cannot get prescription vitamin D and get your vitamin D levels up. It's not the right form. It's the inactive form of vitamin D. It does not work. You have to get vitamin D3 mixed with vitamin K2. If you go to my website, there is a link to shop, and I do have my own line of products. And my vitamin D is called Ultra Vitamin D, and it does have K2 mixed in it. I run blood tests all the time on people, and almost nobody has sufficient vitamin D levels, again, because we walk around wearing shirts. Now, I'm not telling everybody to go topless, but I am saying that is why our vitamin D levels are low. The darker your skin complexion, the harder it is for you to make vitamin D, because melanin naturally blocks the sun, because people with darker skin complexion tend to live in sunny places like Africa or Jamaica, where I really belong, on a beach. So usually I wouldn't have problems making vitamin D, because my regular everyday life, I'd be outside and I'd be laying on the beach. But no, I live in Charlotte and I'm inside of a house. And when I'm, I had an office, I was inside of the office, and I don't really walk around Charlotte topless. It's just not cool, so I don't get as much sun that I need. And so since vitamin D is not a real vitamin, it's a hormone, your body has to make it. You have to make sure that you are supplementing it, and you're doing that D3 with K2 blend, and it has to be the right ratio. A lot of people are taking vitamin D because they're hearing about it and it's not doing a thing because it's the wrong form of vitamin D. So that's the takeaway. I make sure that I boost their vitamin D levels. If they had a cold, if they had the flu, if they had cancer, it would be the same thing, because vitamin D is the key to turning on the immune system.
Gotcha. So is vitamin D, and like, because I hear people say, take elderberry,
No,
whatever,
no,
and all these other different things, and orange juice, and
absolutely not.
okay, so it's vitamin D, and I think you said K2.
Yeah, vitamin D K and K2 blend, and the ultra vitamin D supplement has the right ratio of vitamin D and K2 in it. And so that's the one I take every single day. I take 2 every morning, which is a pretty high dose. And, I'm not getting sick.
Yeah,
And even a healthy immune system, if you get in contact with some nasty virus or bacteria, you should have a reaction. Your immune, it's not like you never ever get sick, but you should be able to, feel crappy for a couple of days and get over it and move on. You shouldn't die.
Gotcha. That's good stuff. We put your website up for people to go take a look at that, man. I could go on for a whole nother hour, but for the sake of time, I just want to say thank you so much. And you gave away the game, just like we try to do. And so I hope people take advantage of some of the things that Dr. Parks talked about. I would even, because I was a patient, and when I was consistent in being a patient, I mean, every single quote unquote issue that I had, it reversed itself. And that was not taking medication. That was, doing supplements, doing exercises, eating certain things. And so, I can kind of vouch for the success of the way you practice. So thank you so much for taking the time tonight to come on. And everybody go to drparks.com, and that's Parks with an E, and check out her website. Also, if you haven't, go vote. North Carolina did the dang thing today.
Hey,
5 p.m., over 250,000 people voted. And so I know I actually got turned around at a polling spot, so I haven't voted yet myself, but I definitely will. I got turned around because it was just so many people, and the line was so long. I actually had a car line and a walk-up line. And this is how, at this particular rec center, the people that were working there, one of the people came up to me and said, "Hey, if you get out of the car line and get into the get into the walk-up line, you'll save a whole hour." And I'm thinking, well, if I save an hour, how long, is it to
how long is the wait?
Get up front? How long is the wait? Right. So please go vote. Early voting started in North Carolina. Check the schedule. Matter of fact, I'll post the schedule into the group for every single state, because we're represented by, a few dozen states and, a few dozen countries. So yeah, please go vote. Go vote. So thanks again, Dr. Parks. I apologize that you're a Patriots fan.
Oh God.
And outside of that, you all right with me, and I got your back.
Thank you so much.
You're familiar.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm gonna send you a Christmas gift.
Oh my God. So everyone, thanks again for joining. Please share the video. We have a YouTube channel now, so you can go out and watch these videos on YouTube as well. Also, you can watch them inside of the group, inside of our private group. And please do not forget to invite someone if you think they can benefit from some of the things that we're talking about, some of the game that we're giving away. And so with that, I'm going to say good night and God bless. Bye-bye.